My generation is struggling with loneliness. According to recent studies, millennials are the demographic that is most at risk due to loneliness. The loneliness epidemic that Vivek Murthy, the Surgeon General, warned against affects all demographics, but it seems like millennials, it's affecting the most. 21% of adults report that they have serious feelings of loneliness. In a modern society where we're more digitally connected, people feel more socially isolated. According to this recent study, ages 30 to 44, 29% of people in this age report that they're frequently or always lonely. 29%. Now, younger folks, 18 to 29, the rate was 24%. 45 to 64 years old, the rate was 20%. And adults over 65, 10%. So it seems like the demographic group that is struggling the most is the millennials, followed then by the younger cohort, and then the older cohorts follow. The older people seem to be less digitally connected because they have real-world friends. U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy put a spotlight on this a few years ago, and I see it in my life where I see people who are increasingly struggling with loneliness. So why is loneliness increasing? So the first reason is technology and social media. It seems technology fosters more interactions on the digital lens, but without real-world deep connections. And social media creates this false sense of connection to people where we're in people's lives for longer, but it's just a shallower relationship. Remote work after the pandemic has also increased loneliness. So previously, people were developing strong relationships at work through face-to-face relationships, but since the pandemic, a lot of work has moved remote, and so there's less workplace camaraderie. These were leading to more casual relationships and even romantic relationships, and so there's fewer opportunities for casual socializing. Oftentimes people create friendships through work, and with remote work, those relationships are really reducing. There's also changing social structures. People are moving towards urban areas and further away from families. If you rewind the clock 100 years, people used to live very close to their parents, to their siblings, to their community, the community that they grew up in. People are moving more, so there's more physical mobility. People live further away from their parents than they ever have, and there's less community institutions that they're tied to. The decrease in social capital and social structures that bound us together is something that I'm very passionate about. The most pivotal work on this was written in year 2000. It's called Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam. It's Bowling Alone, The Collapse and Revival of American Community. It's one of my favorite books. This was written by a professor before the rise of the internet and social media, and nonetheless, he writes about the decline in social capital. He says, community involvement, friendships, social networks, and civic engagement, those were the foundations of community, and people are less involved in those social networks. Not social networks in the way we view them now, but the more traditional social networks. Americans used to be more involved in clubs and religious groups and organizations and neighborhood activities like labor unions or the PTA. He says that the title of the book comes from the fact that people used to join bowling groups, and now people are bowling alone. And those bowling groups, while unimportant, seemingly unimportant, were actually incredibly important to developing close-knit relationships. He writes this before social media and before the internet explodes, and he blames technologies like TV. The decline of social capital started before social media, but it has only been exacerbated by social media and technology and work from home. This has led to a lot of mental health struggles for a lot of people. Depression and anxiety are ubiquitous, and it's a vicious cycle where People withdraw from society. It makes them more lonely, and then it worsens their mental health. And it's this vicious cycle. People used to be in closer knit communities, and that allowed us to look out for our neighbor, love thy neighbor like themselves. Consumer culture also has added to this social isolation where people are more focused on their own individual success and material wealth over the happiness of themselves and their community and their neighbors. The effects of loneliness are beyond just being sad. I think this is an important point. Loneliness creates a physical effect. Loneliness, as U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy warns the public, it's creating physiological impacts that there's an increase in the risk of heart disease, stroke, and high blood pressure among those who are lonely. And the Harvard longitudinal study that shows 80-year-olds that asks 80-year-olds what drives them to live longer and creates the most fulfillment in their lives, they say it's the relationships in their lives. This is a massive study over a very long period of time, and it says that the people who live longest are those who have the deepest relationships. Loneliness also increases the chances of developing dementia in older adults, a weakened immune system, more susceptibility to depression, anxiety, and mental health, and of course, rates of suicide are linked to loneliness, drugs, and substance abuse and reliance on opioids. Obviously, we are the last 10 years we have seen the height of the opioid epidemic. This is deeply linked to the loneliness epidemic. On an individual level, these are really upsetting effects. On a societal level, it leads to people distrusting institutions and distrusting their fellow citizens. It leads to people who are less employable, higher healthcare costs, and of course, a weaker democracy. We should be worried about this on a personal level. People are sad and lonely, and the best way to combat the loneliness epidemic is to reach out to somebody who you love and care about and make sure that they're supported and invite them to the social aspects and create the social institutions that you wish to see in the world. On a larger level, it's about social cohesion matters to the health of our society. You can't start a civil war and hate your neighbor if you know them very well. If you go to church with a person, you're unlikely to hate them. Our society is so fractured, and part of that is that the things that used to bind us together are disappearing, and this is a deep concern for society at large.